it's very hard. It's very hard to see your staff get hurt. And then even a year later, I had to testify in court.
Okay.
So I'm like, that did not happen.
I
But
pushed the case.
no, there was no follow-up. There was no follow-up. Nobody wants to be in trouble because they don't want to be put in that box.
Okay, Code 6 with Michael Laidler. What's up, bro?
Not much, man. I like the hat you got on.
Yeah, well, it's a reason why I wore it. You're from Houston. Joe Gamaldi, you know who Joe Gamaldi
Yeah, I do.
is? Yeah, so, I kind of asked Joe, and I'll probably ask you the same thing before we get into all this
I know
IA
he's
stuff.
won a few championships lately. I know that.
Yeah, but you know what? Running around third base in the World Series and telling your teammates, don't take my shirt off because I may be wired.
You got to tell them something. At least they're communicating, right? We talk about communication skills is like the number of reasons people get divorced. So I guess in this case, I mean, it was a good thing, right?
That and beating the trash. Wasn't it like beating the trash cans to, signals?
Yeah. Hey, you got to do something. Hey. What do they say? If you ain't
If you ain't winning, you ain't. If you ain't cheating, you ain't winning.
Yeah. You got to try.
You got that right. You got to try. I'll give you that. But to this very day, don't. Yeah,
It's different though, and I was excited. I saw the highlights of a Dodgers game yesterday. I wasn't gonna go to the game because I saw that line wrapped around like 6 miles to go get these 10,000 bobbleheads that were given out by the DH, which I'm not a baseball person naturally, but I heard how good he is. He hit the 40-40 club, and I was like, this guy's actually pretty good. He's like 6'4", 210.
Yeah.
But when I say that game was packed, people were sending me things on IG, and I was just like, this is why I don't go to Dodgers games. This is why I just wanted to go see the game, just the game in general.
Right.
But apparently yesterday was not the night.
No, that wasn't the night. And speaking of, in Houston, there's just, avid fans, just like crazy for the Astros.
Our parking lots and our waiting lines are not wrapped around the corner like that, though.
Okay.
I can tell you. Minute Maid Park is a little different from Dodger Stadium.
Okay, I'm glad you said that. We got a little something going on over here. Hey, man, look. Let's have a good conversation about all this good stuff. I'll start off with asking you, look, you came on the job in 2005 in Tallahassee, right?
Absolutely.
And did anyone come in when you were in the academy and said, "Hi, we're internal affairs. Let me tell you what our function are." Or when you were on probation, right, with your field training officer, did he or she say anything about internal affairs? And what I'm trying to get to is that what was your impression when you first started in law enforcement about internal affairs? Because you and I can agree that the stigma is just so negative for all these decades. What do you think?
Do you mean the boogeyman? Is
Yes.
that who you're talking about? You're talking about the boogeyman? That's what I knew about internal affairs. Most of my career, I thought IA, internal affairs, the people, the suits, whatever you want to call them, was the boogeyman. So nobody knew who they were. Nobody wanted to talk to them. But when you got called to go say anything to them, you were scared to death. So I can't remember if it was my time in the academy or if it was my rookie year or when I actually had to go to IA. As a police officer, only as a witness. I don't know how I got out of all the other crazy things I did, but that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole nother episode.
But I can talk about some of the stuff now because I don't work for the police department. But
Right.
what I heard early on was nothing ever positive. And even to today, I've done it in different agencies and I've been in different roles, and it's always that negative stigma behind IA, internal affairs, and sometimes it's warranted, depends on who's in there.
Correct.
And sometimes it's like, maybe I shouldn't say. I remember a time when I was a police officer, the one time I did get called to IA, and myself and another officer, he still works there, so I'm not going to name who he is.
Of course.
We were kind of, we were hard chargers. So we used to doing traffic stops. We loved the foot pursuits. We loved getting people with warrants. And this one particular day, he had stopped a vehicle, and as he stopped the vehicle, what do people do when they don't want to get stopped? The guy bailed out. So I was coming around the corner. I saw my partner running towards him, and then I got out, ran towards him as well. There was a single-family dwelling. It apparently was his house, the offender's house. So my buddy ended up chasing him to the backyard. And I was like, dang it, I got to get inside the house too. So I was like 20, 21 at the time. I go through the front door. Now, I didn't kick it in. Now, I didn't know there was rules against that because I saw my partner go to the back. It wasn't like exigent circumstances. I go through the front door, and there's like a family sitting on the couch, and I'm like, well, they're not involved. And as I round the corner, my buddy somehow, I don't know how he got in the house, But he's in the house and he's trying to cut. He ends up getting in the hallway, getting the guy on the ground, trying to cuff him. And then as I come around, there's like this kid, like 10 or 11. And I'm like, hey, you need to get back, young man, just get back. So he comes closer, and then I just have to at least hold my hand out, hey, just get back. And I move him back a little bit. We get the offender handcuffed. The guy had a warrant. It was nothing too heavy.
Right.
But that wasn't the end of the call. Well, it was the end at the time.
Man.
So we do that. We get the guy cuffed. We think it's all over.
Okay.
Months later, I don't know when it was, a union rep contacts like, hey, you got a IA case. You got to go testify. And I was like, really? What did I do? Because at that point, I didn't know what I did. There was too many things to keep up with. So
It's a couple months later. You're like, which one are you talking about?
Yeah, you don't want to be that person. You're just like, well, did they find this or they find that? Every newer officer, I don't know who's watching or listening, but every newer officer has pushed the needle a little bit in their career, and sometimes they don't know what they've done at this point.
Yeah.
You don't know if maybe I came to work 1 minute late, or maybe that illegal pursuit I wasn't supposed to be in. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I didn't
I'm
know.
with
So,
you. I'm
so
with
she
you.
came and she's like, hey, so you're only a witness in this case. So if they don't ask you a certain question, just say yes or no. They said don't. They was like, don't go into details. Just do this. I was like, yes, ma'am. Okay. So I get in there, and the internal affairs investigator, he's going through the case a little bit. I don't remember all the things he said, but from the details that I remember, he was like, all right, so you guys are chasing this guy. You guys go in the house, and the complaint was that the white officer with the blue eyes pushed the kid. They really didn't even have me in it.
Okay.
So I'm like, that did not happen.
I
But
pushed the kid.
No, there was no follow-up. There was no follow-up. The only question was, did you see this officer push the kid or move him out the way? I was like, no, I did not. They was like, oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I learned early on about IA is sometimes you don't have to say everything. Only answer the questions that's asked to you. So that was my one experience with IA. And before that, and even after that, I still had that stigma of the boogeyman.
Yes.
And it was because essentially depends on how IA investigation goes. You could be fired. Like, you could be removed, and that's a real thing, and people don't think about that side. Sometimes I've seen some leaders and managers say, well, let's just put this person under investigation, or let's just put a referral on them. And when you do that, you create that negative atmosphere because you're like, why are you putting me through a case? Yeah. Some agencies actually unwrittenly, if that's the right way to say it, they unwrittenly give you discipline. Like, they put you on the rubber gun squad, or they put you in like the admin room pending an investigation. So sometimes it's like, it's not good just to put people under that. Yeah. So in his case, I mean, I don't think he was worried because he was like, dude, I didn't do anything. Right. That was you. But we kind of left it there.
Yeah.
And like I said, I didn't do anything wrong. I was really just moving the kid out the way.
Right.
But that was my first experience early on in my career with IA.
What can we do, if any, to get rid of the boogeyman syndrome as it relates to internal affairs?
For me, I did spend some time as a lead internal affairs investigator for some time. And one of the things I made an effort to do was get out and be around the people. Because especially in certain environments, if you're dealing with the community, inmates, offenders, whoever it might be, you're probably gonna get complained about at some point. So for me, I knew I was going to see different people at some point, but I wanted them to see me in a good light ahead of time. So it's kind of like when you say, well, I want to see the chief of police make rounds. I want to see the sheriff make rounds. I want to see the warrant make rounds. From internal affairs, I think the investigators should be making rounds too. Like, not just being seen when a person's coming in and you're drenched with sweat, like, oh my gosh, am I getting fired today? That's not the time you need to be seen. You need to be proactive in that. And you're not really taught that. It's just like a people thing. But it's like, I got to the point as an IA investigator that when people came to see me, they felt comfortable enough that they knew I wasn't just trying to chop their head off. Now, you have to do things. I mean, like me, I know we were going to get to this at some point, but since I'm thinking about it now. For me as an IA, when I did IA investigations at any level, I'm just looking for the truth. I'm not trying to go after the officer. I'm not trying to help the agency out. I'm just, if the truth is there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. Like, let's not add anything to it. So I was fortunate enough, I never had any leaders that were like, hey, Michael, I need you to push this case, or I need you to make sure. Like, I never had that. I don't know if everybody can say that. But there's a lot of people that say that they have been pressured into a certain thing. But for me, to change that stigma, I think if you're proactive, like community policing, but in a sense of the internal affairs aspect, I think that goes far, because you don't want people to only know you as the hammer. You don't want people to only know you as the boogeyman that can get them fired. You're like, no, this is a regular person. He likes to have fun. He likes to have a drink here and there. He likes to be here for celebrations, not just when we're trying to take somebody out.
Totally. You just reminded me to even prompt a question that would it be, we always claim this thin blue line, right? We're brotherhood, sisterhood. We're here to help you. We are going to go all this to this together. But yet when someone gets an IA, you know, oh, I can't talk to you. You know, you're this bad person. I suppose, would it be fair to say that how we treat each other also has a contribution into this negative stigma?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I hate about being under an investigation, or when we reassign people at any level, like you put them on a rubber gun squad, because now you put them in a box. And no matter what you do or say, well, nobody's going to treat you that way. That's a lie.
Yes.
I've seen so many times, and Marlon, I know you're in the same boat, that because now this person's under investigation for selling this blue bottle, now all of a sudden, oh, that person's a thief.
Yes.
And it's like, can
You're
that
this bad person.
Yeah, now they're the thief. And let's not say it's anything else. Let's not talk about any kind of sexual cases or a perceived bad shooting. Now nobody wants to talk to that person. So nobody wants to be in trouble because they don't want to be put in that box and ostracized for something they didn't do. Now, if they did it, they may not mind. Right. But a lot of people I see are, if they did do something wrong, it wasn't maliciously. So a lot of times they get put in that box away from everybody. And I think that's another part of that stigma, which creates the boogeyman kind of
syndrome.
Yeah, syndrome. It's like, well, if I get in trouble, I can't have any friends. Or the friends are like, man, I can't do anything with you right now. I've had people tell me back in the day, like when in a correctional study, if somebody's considered dirty, and that's usually, that phrase is typically used when an officer or a correctional worker is deemed as like giving something to inmates, whether it's sexually or just like drugs, money, whatever that might be. So that word dirty is usually associated. So people don't want to be even labeled as that. But sometimes if someone's labeled that, let's say me and you are friends, I was labeled as dirty because we're friends, they're going to say, now you're dirty.
Correct.
So it's like that going down that path. It's like nobody wants, and then you go back to, well, who's going to deal with this? IA.
Yes.
Internal Affairs. They're going to be the ones that have to investigate it. And, you know, the process isn't always that quick. So now you're in this box by yourself. Even your friends are like, man, I don't want to be associated with you no more. And that's kind of the indirect result of internal affairs. So once again, it puts internal affairs in the light of, now I'm fighting up because the person's already upset. Their mental well-being has been beaten up because they're by themselves in this world. And now you go there and they're like, why are you so upset? Like, why do you like you're having a bad day? Because I have no friends left. What do you expect? So I think it's tough to be in internal affairs, whether you're an investigator or the person that has to deal with discipline or whatever that might be, because you're just put in a box no matter what it is. But it's like I said, it's about being proactive and trying to get ahead of it versus just being reactive.
Very, very well said. Would you agree with me with this following phrase? The punishment's not the penalty. The punishment is the process.
Absolutely. That's from what I've experienced, because I mean, I've had my share of cases. All I said was early on that I got in trouble once as an officer. Now, I never said I didn't get in trouble for anything else after that. So I've been in the penalty box before, where now you're under that guise, that scope of, okay, now I'm the one in trouble. And sometimes you see stuff and you're like, I didn't do anything wrong, but now I'm put into that box as well. So even in those situations, it goes back to, what am I doing to create a perception that I'm not looking crazy like that? Because even in those cases, when you're under the investigation, you're just like, oh man, this is ridiculous. Now I got to go through the process.
It's some bullshit.
And then sometimes the penalty's a letter. You're like, I didn't went through this thing for 6 months, 12 months. 12 months. I mean, officer involved shooting. I mean, most, and I don't know how agencies are changing or how they're different, but I mean, you fire your gun in the line of duty at any agency, more likely you're going to spend at least a couple of weeks. And a lot of times, depends on if you actually kill somebody, you're probably going to be in a grand jury. So that's putting you, now you're like, oh man, what's going to happen? I have these jury of 6 to 12. Now they're going to decide my fate in my career. If they say there's enough evidence to indict me, now that's going to be even a long process. And even at the end, you may not get convicted, because when people look at it, it's like, you know what? He was right. Like he was, and a lot of people are right. So the process, I think, is harder than the punishment always.
Yeah, no, very well said. Do you think the job of an internal affairs investigator is to protect cops?
I think it's to protect the truth.
Very well said.
I don't like I mentioned earlier. I never go to any information to say, oh, I want to get this person out of trouble, or I want to get this person in trouble.
Yeah.
Because that's not the right way to look at internal affairs. I think the people that look at it in that manner are the ones that are creating that boogeyman syndrome.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, only time you're going to see me is when I'm coming after you, Marlon.
Yeah.
And people say that like, oh, the only time I've seen this person is when they're writing me up or when they're looking for something.
Yeah.
So I believe if you're in internal affairs, it should be about the truth.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, if someone says, "Whoa, Michael stole this water bottle," if there's no evidence to say I stole a water bottle, even if you think it as an investigator, you can't do anything, and you shouldn't be trying to overstress the truth.
Yeah.
So it's not about protecting the cops or protecting the agency. I think it's about protecting the truth.
Yeah.
And you get to the truth, and that's all it's about. And that's what helped me out when I was an investigator, because people knew that, hey, I'll tell them I have this evidence or I don't have the evidence.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not sitting there trying to trick you and say, does he have the truth?
Yeah.
Because people are always like, oh, well, I say, wait, before you get all nervous and you start trying to tell me something, this is what I have. I have this video, or I don't have anything.
Yeah.
So just tell me, did you do it or not? If you tell me you didn't do it, I can ride with it. But if I tell you I have the evidence and then you sit here and lie, it's going to be worse. You're gonna get sustained. Like, you're gonna get sustained. Like, I don't like, you don't even, when I had the evidence, I just tell people, hey, I really don't even need your statement, but I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt so you can explain why you did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, no, totally.
So, yeah, so back to, it's really about protecting the truth.
Yes.
And if you can do that as an investigator,
Yeah.
or if you go as being investigated into that atmosphere where you're like, you know what, if I just tell the truth, you're gonna succeed. I mean, that's the process. I mean, even if someone says, oh, I have this evidence, but you know it's not true. Okay, you don't have the evidence. Why are you lying? And then it's bad for the investigator that then called a bluff because it's different. So I don't know. I think sometimes as investigators, we sometimes look at our peers as like street suspects.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, they're still peers.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have done something bad. I mean, if you have the evidence, like, let's say they actually, like, let's say, for example, they actually molested a kid or something like that, and you have the evidence, like, yeah, they're a criminal. But if they're late to work, like, why are you treating them like that?
Yeah.
Like, why are you treating them like they don't?
Like he was a sex, like he's a child molester.
Like he's a child molester. Like, why did you see him like he just
He's a
committed?
rapist. He just committed
like you know this dude's like 5 minutes late to work. Like, if he's 5 minutes, just let him be 5 minutes. Like sustain the case and keep going. But you don't have to sit here and drill him. Like, hey, like you're sitting here trying to use all the John Reed techniques that you learned throughout your career. Like, hey, I'm gonna break him. I'm gonna turn the lights down. I'm gonna give
make
him
the room cold.
Yeah, make the room cold. I'm gonna have him sit there like on the first 48. Like, oh my gosh, what is going on? So no, you don't need to do all of that. Go for the truth. Don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Don't try to make things up. And you'll find yourself as an investigator, especially when you're dealing with your peers, a lot easier because they're going to come in and tell you the truth if they know they can.
Yeah.
I have learned that so long. I've had people come up to me later. It's like, man, I knew I was getting in trouble, but the fact that we knew you were just going for the truth, we were fine with doing that. I mean, I would have people officers, well, non-managers, come without union reps.
Yeah.
Because they was like, and the union reps would be like, nah, just go see him.
Yeah.
He's just going for the truth.
Yeah.
Well, but that's, when you get to that point, Marlon, it makes it easier for the whole department too, because you're
100%.
creating a culture of trust. It's like, hey, if you drop the ball, Laidler's going to get you.
Yeah.
If you didn't drop the ball, just go in there and say what you did, and you're done. Like, your case is not sustained or you're not in trouble. But it's about that boogeyman syndrome. And then, there's a few apples out there that fall off the tree and they want to be the person.
Self-serving.
Yeah, they're like, oh, man, I can get Marlon.
Yeah.
I got a surprise. Or that leader that doesn't like Marlon, now he or she is saying, you know what? If we can get him in trouble, maybe he won't make detective. Maybe he won't make sergeant.
Yeah.
And those are back to the boogeyman syndrome.
Yeah, no, totally, 100%. You kind of answered the next question I was going to ask you. If you were in a room full of sergeants and they're getting ready to begin their assignment, what's the one thing you would want them to know about their job?
Be truthful. Like be truthful and know the rules. If
Of
you
the
don't,
game.
but if you don't know what you're doing, don't fake it, because there's some staff, employees that get in trouble a lot.
Yeah, when they don't know.
Yeah, no, they just get in trouble because that's just who they are, and they know some things more than you do. So if now you're a sergeant over something like internal affairs, don't go in there like you know it. If you don't know it, you need to get to that lead investigator, or you need to reach out to your peers like, hey, man, I got this case. Who should I ask about this one?
Yeah.
Because so many times we get the leaders, they come from, let's say, they're this high-level SWAT officer or they're a narc or something like that, and they get something like internal affairs. It's like, no, if this was not your wheelhouse, there's so many rules and litigation that comes from internal affairs.
Officers' rights, all kinds of stuff.
You don't want to F it up because you thought you knew more.
Yeah.
No, go and ask questions. So if I was sitting in that room with them and they was like, hey, first day of training, be truthful and know your stuff before you start trying to hammer people, because you're going to find yourself losing credibility, or you're going to be that boogeyman because people are going to say, you're just trying to hammer us. You don't even know what you're doing. Or maybe you were that guy that was sleeping on the job and now you're trying to hammer, like you're trying to go hunt people that are sleeping on the job. So you got to be careful with that too.
Well, I was going to ask you the next question. When you investigated your peers, if you will, as an IA investigator, were you prepared? And if so, or if you weren't, what kind of advice would you give someone to prepare for this type of this job?
I was prepared every single time. I was prepared.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to ask is that were you an investigator before that, and how important or what tools do you need to become one? Because you're a room full of sergeants. You just got done saying it might be he just got out from being a SWAT officer. Mm-hmm. You got a SWATologist, right? And you have someone who is just been in patrol all his career, but yet he doesn't really has investigated. What tools, or how do you prepare, or what would you tell him to prepare, or were you prepared?
Yeah, I was prepared. I was in a situation. By the time I truly started to do internal affairs, at that point, I already had my time as a police officer. So obviously, we've done investigations. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether it's going to calls for service, like a DV case, or just doing a traffic stop investigation. So you kind of have those tools. And then I became a Border Patrol agent. So worked on my communication skills a little bit more, trying to understand people and how to figure out, like, interviewing, looking for different body signs, especially working on the border. I mean, you're looking at body signs all day long. I mean, I used to work when I was a canine handler. I used to people would drive up, if they're clips tight on the steering wheel like this, you might be hiding something. But they're just like, hey, man, hey, agent, I don't got nothing in there. I know your dog's looking crazy, but I don't know what's back there.
God.
Sir, I don't know what's back there, but it might be something.
That must have been crazy.
But then when I got into federal corrections, and then I became a investigator over inmate cases. So that gave me different training, like John Reed, other communication training. And then by the time I got to be in internal affairs, I was a lieutenant. So once again, I'm supervising other people in a leadership role, just in a different manner.
Yeah.
And then eventually I got over to internal affairs. So for me, I would say it was an accumulation of interviewing skills. So if you're trying to get yourself ready to interview employees, if you're going from being a traffic cop to internal affairs, that's a big jump. You know what I mean? But some of the same like skills of like interpersonal skills and speaking as like a narcotics investigator.
Yes.
I mean, you can that's transferable.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
You also want to know that once again that your employees are not a crackhead. Yeah. Like there's two different groups of people. So you can't just come with a certain approach and try to hit them over the head. So there's so many different investigation schools that people should do. I don't endorse any particular one, meaning that there's so many of them, just choose one. But all that will help you out.
Savage Training Group, man.
Savage Training Group,
exactly.
Yes.
There you
I don't
go.
know how
Internal
many
Affairs Investigation. We just got done getting our 3-day mandated in the state of California investigation course. You got to come to our course, and I'll get you ready, man.
No, but Marlon, that's any person that wants to get internal affairs, they need to get in courses like that, because you want to have every tool possible.
Yeah.
And 3 days of a train like that goes farther than 0 days.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? And
for a traffic cop.
Yeah, for a traffic cop. Oh yeah, no, a traffic cop is struggling. They're sweating bullets in there. They're sitting there talking about what are all these different rules? What do you mean you gotta have them sign this Weingartner? What is a Weingarner?
Yeah.
And I'm probably not even saying it right.
What's Garrity? What's this? What's all
like,
that
what am I
stuff?
doing all this? So no, courses like what you guys offer at the Savage Group, I think is extremely vital, because there's skill sets, there's certain things that you need to know going into internal affairs, like certain methods and certain rules and laws, and you don't want to go there and you might get a big case right out the gate, because we know just like on a patrol, patrol stop, you don't know what you're going into. Same thing with a case. You could be day one, like, all right, Sarge, guess what just popped in? You have these 5 officers beating somebody up in the state of Tennessee. Like now you got to go. You're up. You're up on deck. So getting some of those skills ahead of time, going to courses even without your agency requiring them to do it, I think is important. And I think a lot of times people wait too long to get those courses. So for me, if I had that desire to get into internal affairs, or I wanted to just sharpen my skills, I would look at courses like you guys have, because it's like, all right, there's somebody more than likely that has done this before me. Let me go learn. So I'm not in here trying to guess when we impact somebody else's freedom.
Yeah, no, totally. And then become a boogeyman.
Yeah. Oh, you're going to become a boogeyman if you don't know what you're doing.
If I were to put you in a time capsule and bring you back to the U.S. Border Patrol or Tallahassee, what's the one job that you wish you did that you weren't able to do or have, if any? If any.
I got one of my dream jobs when I became a canine handler in Border Patrol. I always wanted to be a canine handler. That was one thing that I always wanted to do as a street cop. I don't know what it was about the dog tracking and going to get the suspect. You're like, hey, they used to have the call sign was like kilo, and then you'd have a 3-digit number. So, for example, my number back then was 383. I would have loved to have been kilo 383, because you hear that, like it's like your heart starts racing. You're like, oh, here comes the dogs. Here comes that German Shepherd or their Belgian Malinois. So that is something I wish I was able to do as a street cop. But what I learned when I became a canine handler in Border Patrol is that, like, Border Patrol, they don't have like true tracking dogs. They have like their Boar Star, their Boar Tac, which is like a version of SWAT.
Okay.
They have a tracking dog, but all the other dogs you usually see are not bite dogs.
Okay.
So a street cop, their dogs usually bite.
Right.
I don't like getting bit by dogs. I have a few marks on my hands and my thighs from my dog like accidentally biting me. I can only imagine if he was trained to bite. So if it was for me, one job I wish I would have got earlier in my career, which I would honestly, if I would have gotten that, or been able to at least apply for it, I may have actually stayed a police officer longer, because the canine, it's like, if any canine handler's watching, or I don't know if you did it all, but it's like a 10-year track usually. Like, it's not like a one dog. It's like,
they love it.
Yeah, they love it. Most of them, unless, a lot of times, the only time I see them come out is if they truly want a promotion. If not, they get into that canine role.
You'll never see them leave.
And you'll never see them leave, because
agree.
you love your dog. I mean, like, even now, I don't have a dog because I know how much it takes, and I travel so often.
Yeah.
I know, I was like, I want to build a Belgian Malinois. Man, I'm dying to get one.
Right.
But I know that if I really want to love that dog the way it should be loved, I have to be home.
Yes.
So I know from the experience of being a canine handler that I probably wouldn't have left Tallahassee if I would have gotten that position. Now, and I never had the chance because of just the timing. Yeah. And those guys were like those old school officers. It's like they show up on scene and they've been canine handlers for 10 to 15 years. And they retire one dog and get the second dog, and who's going to really argue with them? Yeah. But that's what I wanted to be early on in my career. I did, like I said, I got that. And outside of that, all the other positions that I truly wanted, I got. I did the internal affairs just because I wanted to understand that side. I became a supervisor. I don't know what other position I would have really wanted.
Good.
I mean, I've been blessed in that way that I've gotten a lot of positions that I reached out, and that's a whole other story on how you get there. But it's whatever you usually want in law enforcement, you can typically get with the right training.
Yeah, no, totally, 100%.
Appreciate training at that.
Gotta throw that out there. Come on, man, give me that. Of course. Hey, IA Store, you told me one. Is there anything else that you can think of that we can share to the audience, lessons learned, or any takeaways from any other functions that you did as an IA investigator?
Takeaways, I would say, you never know what kind of case you're going to get. I can remember a case, and I'm not going to say what time of my career it was in, but actually, it's gonna. There's no way I can get away from this one.
Okay,
but
it's okay.
That's just no. We gonna keep this recorded. We gonna keep this recorded.
We're gonna keep it real.
Yeah. We're gonna keep it real. We're gonna let our two guys say, hey, y'all ain't gonna edit this 100. out. I just can't say the time of the year, but I'm gonna tell you the circumstances around it.
Okay.
So I was doing inmate investigations, and we had a CI because we cultivated CIs in a prison. If people don't know, inmates snitch. Like, they tell. Like, people don't believe it. Like, some of my best CIs, aka snitches, were at our high security prisons because a lot of them live there. That's their home. That's their home. Probably for life. So
they're safe haven.
Yeah, they're safe haven. And a lot of them, especially the OGs, so to speak, they don't want trouble because that messes up their house and they mess up their hustle. So I mean, they're doing their little stuff here and there, but they don't want anything of a big magnitude.
Got it.
So I got called from the CI. I was working the evening watch shift, which over there at the time was like, I want to say it was like 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. I get a call, and I want to see. I was like, hey man, one of your officers are dirty, and this CIO, he was pretty solid. He was pretty good, and I was just like, okay. And usually, like I said, we use that term. Like I only like to use that term if I have evidence on somebody.
Of course.
Whenever I hear other people say it, especially when they don't know, I'm like, don't use that term. Like, because that's a negative connotation.
Yes.
And if you don't have the facts, especially people that are not in the circle, like, oh, that guy's dirty, because it goes back to what we said earlier when we said it puts you in that bubble just because you're under investigation. Other people will say, oh, I heard he's dirty. See, now you done made the man look bad or woman look bad. So the inmate, back to what I was saying, the inmate was like, hey, one of your officers are dirty. And I was like, okay, tell me what's going on. He was like, yeah, he has a phone. He gave this other inmate a phone that's in my unit, and he's sending them pictures. I said, wait, I'm in an all-male prison, and you're telling me that one of the other correctional workers are sending pictures. And he was like, yeah, he's sending pictures. I'm like, because in my head, I don't want to go down the road that I'm thinking about, the road that everybody's waiting to hear right now and see. It was that road that we were going down. So I was like, all right, what kind of pictures was it? He was like, of his genitals. I was like, you're telling me, I'm on the phone on a recorded line with an inmate. So you're telling me that there's an officer right now that's sending pictures of himself to another inmate of his genitals. This male sent it to this male. He was like, that's exactly what I'm saying. Laidler, that's what I'm telling you. Like, you got to clarify this stuff for me. Like, I don't want
to. Hold up.
I had to sit back and like, hold on. I was like,
hold on.
Inmate, hold up.
Hold up.
Did he just say what I think he said to me? Did he really just say that? I said, all right, let me get back into it. Let me
compose myself.
So I said, okay, all right, so tell me a little bit more. And he was like, yeah, this person in this cell, he's out here showing a few of us. Like, hey, I flipped this officer. And I'm like, oh, okay, tell me a little bit more. So needless to say, he gave me more details that I can act on. And we eventually did a little bit more homework.
Okay.
And we
worked it up.
Yeah, we worked it up. And one of the crazy parts about that particular case, and any IA investigator will tell you, is when you know you're working something and you have evidence, you still have to be respectful to people.
Yes.
You still have to be professional. And that's hard when you know that person's wrong, but they haven't went through the due process yet.
Correct.
So I'm doing this investigation of this particular officer, seeing him come to work every day, still got to be cordial. You can't be like, man, you dirty POS, even if you know it, because you can't really do that to be a professional IA. So I was in the boat looking at this guy. So I'm like, okay, let me get all the evidence. So when we finally got all the evidence, exactly what the inmate said he was sending him, he was sending exactly that. Wow. So this particular officer, I didn't see it coming. And in an environment where that's the thing that people don't understand about corrections, is that you're put into an environment of all criminals. Like, that's your job. Like, it's not like this person's like a half criminal or a quarter criminal. Right. This person is a full-time criminal, like convicted. And if you're in a federal prison, you're a convicted felon. Not like you had one bad DUI and got 30 days in a tank. Like, it ain't one of those situations. Like you are dealing with felons. So when I saw this particular officer fall like that, especially at that level, it really opened my eyes to just the possibilities of what can happen. Yeah. And it wasn't a money thing. It was not money at all. Because I'll tell anybody, if they're looking for a career, the federal prison pays a lot of money. Like, you're making 6 figures your first year if you really want to, then depending on what state you're in. Like, you make a great career, but you're very susceptible because you're around criminals all day. Yeah. Versus maybe as a street cop, you may, depends on how your day goes, you may deal with 1 or 2 criminals.
Yes.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You may
not,
you may not be. If you're on the midnight shift or the graveyard shift, you may not talk to anybody all night.
I agree. Yeah. I never applied for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Yeah. Because I knew
the jail side.
Right. That's it. No. Well, can you imagine? And what I didn't like the most was here you are, you get firearms training, in the academy, boom, boom, boom. They say, congratulations. You're going to this jail facility, and then you can't even carry. Yeah. And to your point, I didn't want to be in that environment because I didn't want them to get to know me.
And they do.
And next thing you know, they know my family, they know where I live, favors. You don't do favors, that culture. you know what? I didn't want nothing to do with that.
Yeah, you're nervous to even give them toilet paper like you think you're supposed to give them because you're like, is this a favor or not? Like, hey, can I get a list of the rules? Like people, like, and you say you're like,
can I get a heads up?
Well, is a pencil on here? Is a pencil not on here? like, I know I can't give them drugs. That's a given. I don't even carry drugs.
Yeah,
but,
right. That I know.
Yeah, I know. But am I gonna get in trouble if I give this guy a pen? What if I let him out 1 minute earlier out of his cell?
Oh my!
Am I gonna get in trouble? But that's the kind of thing. But that's the kind of things in the prison or jail environment that you have to affect. Now, I will say, and I didn't say this when I first started my career, but I do wish that everybody starts in a jail or a prison at some like in their career because it shows you that you don't need your gun to talk to people.
Yeah.
And your verbal judo, which is an old school term, I know you and I have used that in our career. Yeah,
we know.
But there's
These
some
kids
people.
don't know.
Yeah, the kids may not know verbal judo. If not, look it up. You can find
Riz.
out. Yeah.
You got to have Riz.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, I don't know
that's
that one.
Your kids. You got to have Riz.
But yeah, so working in a jail or prison gives you that communication. And I've seen a lot of success out of people that start off in a jail or a prison, then hit the streets because they know that they don't need anything on their belt to get their point across. So then that's just my little plug for like anybody that's like where they're at in their career. And trust me, my first 8 years in law enforcement, I never worked in a jail or a prison. So I didn't have that respect, understanding how much they dealt with.
Yeah.
And then when I started working in the prison, I was like, my communication skills are really good. I can go work the streets right now. I could probably talk. I'm not gonna give the analogy, but I could talk people into doing a lot of things.
Yeah, no,
like
totally.
I could probably sit in a room with a convicted felon or someone that's just did 3 murders and probably talk him in, give me the truth because you learn those things in the jail because the jail, just like I said with the snitches and the CIs, they don't have to give you anything because they're in jail already. Yeah. So it's not like you're threatening them. Oh, I'm gonna put you in jail.
Yeah.
You're already in jail.
Yeah.
Like, where are you going?
Yeah.
You're
Where's my benefit?
Yeah,
what do I get out of it?
So you have these lifers. It's like you're learning how to talk. You're learning how to convince people that have life sentences, convince people that have already killed, that you know they killed people, to listen to you. So it's a little different.
No, yeah,
but it's a good difference. Yeah, but I think that'll help people out too. Like as far as like investigations, like spend some time in a jail. Go do some jail investigations, and that's where you get your skills truly tested when you have nothing over them. If you can still get information from somebody when you hold nothing over them,
right?
That's when you know you're getting there.
Yeah. I don't mean to go back and touch on this IA story you gave us.
Let's dab it with the cotton ball.
You know, what was the outcome, if any?
Oh, he ended up getting arrested and charged.
Okay.
Yeah. No, he probably has a registered number right now. I haven't checked because I usually when it gets past my level, like I'm not the one to track and follow cases because there's too much going on. Like I don't like once the charges and the person gets
you're done.
Trouble,
done.
Yeah, I'm done because I'm going to the next one.
Yeah.
So, but no, the person that I know for sure they don't work for the prisons.
Yeah.
I doubt they have any federal job. More than likely, I mean, this was
probably not going to end up being in law enforcement.
Yeah, this was over a decade ago.
Yeah.
So they may be out of jail. They may have gotten out of jail by now. I don't know. But I'm sure they definitely served some prison time at some point.
Wow, man, that's a good one. Okay, let's move on.
Well, yeah, you're not used to hearing people talk about getting photos of genitals from other men to men. So yes, probably not.
Yeah.
The IA probably doesn't.
But
and
you know what?
Will always leave it out in the streets. I can tell you that.
What I will say is that certainly wasn't the first time you dealt with an investigation like that, and sadly, it's probably not going to be the last one.
It wasn't the last.
Someone else.
Yeah.
There's something going on right now, and
it's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, and you know what? As much as we're referring to the boogeyman, as much as there is a negative stigma, that's just to prove that you do need an IA and how important it is.
Yes.
In every single law enforcement organization.
Yeah. When people they look down, like I still have people because they remember my time as IA. They're like, oh, I told myself I haven't been in that role for like 5 or 6 years. They're like, nah, once you're an IA, you're always an IA.
Yeah.
Psychologically to them, but it's still good to know that there's a checks and balance.
Yes.
I think that's where people try to get away from because they don't want to be checked. They don't want to be checked on things. It's like, no, because unfortunately, although we're trained not to do the wrong thing, there's still people in our industry doing the wrong thing. And if you don't have somebody there to investigate or at least look into it,
100%,
then people are just going to do what they want and not do the right thing. That's the sad. It's reality.
Yeah. And then the other thing before we wrap up this segment is that let's just make sure that we let the audience know that we're talking about a very, very small fraction of the population. It's like 0.000. I say this all the time because people think that because of this situation, well, hell, all these correctional officers are like that, or
not at all.
Something happens in LAPD, or well, of course, I can speak for my beloved LAPD. They think that all LAPD officers, when in reality, I mean, for crying out loud, there's like 8,000 plus. At one point when I was there was 10,200 sworn police officers. So
That's a lot. That's
you
a
know,
lot.
let's slow down a little bit. Hey, give me worst incident in your career.
I'm trying to think if I wanted to relate that to something that happened to me, like physically, or just something, an incident that you know what?
Give me an incident. Give me a radio call. Give me.
You know what? And it's not something that directly happened to me, because I always talk about things in my presentations. It's actually something that I saw working in corrections. And I know people keep saying, why does he go back to corrections? Because that's where the last 10 and 11 years of my career has been spent. But it's so many unwritten stories about what they do. I can go look at any police shooting right now online. I can just type police shooting in YouTube. I get a million of those. Yeah. You look at an officer stabbing, you probably get a handful of those. So I remember I was an investigative lieutenant in the prison, and this was in January of 2017. And it was a morning. Morning's normal. Like, you sit there, muster roll call. You sit there, hey, what are we going to do today? And as I was sitting there talking to our captain at the time, we heard an alert call go out. But it wasn't like one of those normal alert calls, because in the prisons, it's not like you say, oh, bail out, and then you have a dispatcher. It doesn't really work like that. They have what they call like control officers, so they may repeat something, but it's not like, hey, you don't always hear everything. So this particular, all you could hear on the radio was like shuffling, and the officer said something like officer needs assistance, but it was one of those that it was because the officer was actually going through something at the time that you just heard it. So we're like, hey, control, did you hear that? And I was like, yeah, we think we heard something. So control starts to pan around the cameras, and then they see in one of the units, they see like a melee going on. So usually when you see like a melee, a fight of any sort, you think it's just inmates fighting.
Okay.
So as they zoomed in, they realized there was 2 blue shirts and a whole bunch of khaki, and 2 khaki uniforms around those 2 blue shirts, because there was inmates fighting officers. And you could see the inmates swinging weapons at the officers. Like, and when I say weapons, it's like handmade knives or like shanks.
And
People call them
shanks.
shanks. Yeah, that's the easiest. Yeah, shanks.
Yeah.
So I see on the camera, me and the captain see it, and we're like, oh, crap. So we run out of that office, which is like in the front of the building, go all the way back, and by the time we get there, what we discovered was both officers had been stabbed, because it was an incident that the inmates thought that they got disrespected, so they was like, hey, we're going to kill these officers today. So for me, I was, like I said, I was a lieutenant, investigative lieutenant, and when I got there, the officers are being escorted out. They're all bloodied up. None of the officers died, which was good, but one of the hardest parts for me to do that day was not just that, because that's not common that officers get stabbed, but it does. I mean, it can happen.
Right.
It happens much more than what people realize.
I can only imagine.
The hardest part for me that day was because, kind of like you or somebody else that hears this, they're pissed off. They're upset. They're like, what do you mean we just let these officers get stabbed? Like, what are we going to do next? So for some reason, I was the person that had to go do the briefing to open up. Right out the gate. So like 30 minutes later, it was like, hey, we want to bring people in, like all the officers and correctional workers, so we can talk to them, let them know what's going on, because if not, you'll have people responding on their own accord.
Correct.
So there was like, all right, let's sit together, let's bring them all in the room, and let's tell them, hey, this is what's going on, we got it handled. So the other leaders above me at the time was like, hey, Mike, you know what? You're gonna start off this recall. And I was like, me? I'm the lowest man on the totem pole. They was like, no, you start off. So why that was so hard for me was because I had to figure out how to curve all my energy to not incite a riot with our staff. Because depending on what I said, they were sitting on their edge. Like, they were on their edge, just wanting to hear what we were going to say.
It's going to have an impact.
Yeah, it's going to have an impact. So for me, that was the hardest time, because I had just seen 2 of my officers get stabbed by inmates, and now I got to tell the other officers, hey, don't do anything, don't be patient, we're going to take care of it. Not knowing what was going to happen to those officers. I mean, because they were stabbed, you never know. I mean, it's like in law enforcement, we roll our ankle and we're in a hospital for 6 months. A bad guy rolls their ankle and they're back out in 30 minutes. So for me, that was probably one of the worst things I had to go to, especially from leadership role, because I had to go see people get stabbed. Obviously, I couldn't do nothing about it. But the aftermath, I had to calm people down when I wasn't calm myself. So that took a whole nother level of leadership that a lot of people don't think, because we all want to go in there and start roughing. Yeah, we want to start touching people up. I mean, that's especially if you were
we're catching hands.
If you were in an older generation or an older year, you definitely want to go put hands on somebody, especially if they assaulted your.
Catching hands and bodies.
Yeah, you're like, hey, where's that hallway where there's no cameras at?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you know what room to take them to. But we definitely don't do that anymore. And if anybody does do that, that's definitely wrong. There's a process for everything. But even then, it was like, hey, what do you want us to do? I mean, we could take him. No, you're not taking that person
Yeah.
over. The person already
Yeah.
got escorted. So for me, that was probably one of the worst things I saw because it's very hard. It's very hard to see your staff get hurt. And then even a year later, I had to testify in court about the whole incident.
Oh, wow.
Like what I saw, the makeup, like what was the interview. So it was like even reliving that all again from a leadership standpoint and seeing the officers. One officer that didn't even come back to work for like a year because he said every time he woke up, he was having nightmares about getting stabbed again.
Oh, wow,
so
dude.
sitting there in that room with him later, just kind of going through that process was tough.
Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that, man. All right, well, let's get to something good, man. Give me best achievement, reward, award, or something good. Give me something positive that you had in your career.
In my career, I think it was the moment when, and I'll keep it related to IA. I think it was the moment when I realized people started to trust me. So in a sense of, because where I went to be IA at, I was an outsider. Because in the prison side, they don't always just promote you where you're at. So like, let's say LAPD, for example. LAPD, you're going to hire someone that's with the LAPD. Like they're not coming from Oregon.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Or they're not
Correct.
coming from Arizona. Like
Got
it's
it.
somebody that's more than likely worked the streets with you, the patrol.
Yeah.
A lot of times in the federal prisons, they'll bring, like, you're all federal employees, you're
Yeah.
all prison employees, but you might be working on another site, and you may have never seen this group. So it's very hard for them to distrust you right out the gate because they're like, what is he coming in here for? Is he the boogeyman?
Yeah.
Or is he that person that's just trying to get the truth?
Yeah.
So I remember the first time that someone came to my office without a union rep, and I was literally confused. I was like, hey, man, where's your rep at? They was like, we already went by there. They told me we're good. And I was like, really? So I called them. I said, hey, you know this person came here without you, right? They were like, yeah, we know. Yeah, they're fine. Just do your thing. Okay. So for me, that was one of the most rewarding things because it showed me, and this didn't come like in month one. This was like 6 to 9 months into it.
Yeah.
That showed me that all the things I was doing as a person to not be the boogeyman was paying off because an outsider to that culture, they were trusting enough, and they knew. Even the guy was like, yeah, I know I'm in trouble. They said, even the union say, hey, you're just go take it. Just
Yeah.
And mind you, it wasn't like where we were set up at. It wasn't like it was like you had to drive from here to the police academy.
Yeah.
It was like all within one little building.
Yeah.
So they could have walked the 30 steps to my office to be with this person. Like it wasn't like they couldn't come to me.
Correct.
They were just like, nah, just go, just get your. And I told them, I said, they was like, nah, we'll just read the affidavit and we'll just have to during the disciplinary process, we'll just have to try to argue our case at that point because they knew the merits of the case, that he was guilty, and they knew he was coming to me, so they knew I wasn't going to try to fabricate anything. Yeah. So that was one of those rewarding times when staff started to trust me to say, you know what, hey, you're going to treat me right. I know I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Let me just get this through. I know you're not going to mess it up.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Damn, that was good. What are we doing now, man? Talk to me. Tell us where we can find you, what you got going on. I know that you do a lot of public speaking. And you got this podcast. Tell us all about it, bro.
Back in 2019, I created a podcast called the LEO First Podcast. And my goal at the time was to just humanize the badge and just try to elevate our industry. Because back then, at least my perception was that we weren't getting a fair share of the media's perception.
Yes.
And it was my ideas, okay, what can I do as a black male to kind of elevate any law enforcement officer so we're not looking crazy? How can I deposit good money into the bank? Because when something bad happens, you have to have something in there to get the money from. So I started my podcast in 2019, and I'm gonna be straightforward. And by 2020, I had just got burned out, and I think that's just because of all the editing, and I don't have a beautiful setup like you have here. I don't have a whole team with me. I don't have Mohit like the one we use for like. I didn't have all those people, so I was doing my podcast through Zoom, doing all the editing. So I got burned out. But then it wasn't until the summer of 21 that I was sitting in my house, and by the time then we were already like kind of at the tail end of COVID. George Floyd happened, Breonna Taylor happened. I was like, man, I need to get back on this. I need to get back on building people up. So at that point, I didn't start my podcast back yet. I started speaking on mental wellness for law enforcement, and I started doing my keynotes. And I didn't realize how many people, starting pretty much in 2022, was really starting to kind of pick that up. Like it wasn't a pickup right away, but by the end of that year, like of 22, I had so many people say, hey, we want to hear more about mental wellness. We want to hear that side of law enforcement. So in May of 23, people started asking me, they was like, hey, do you have a podcast or anything like that? I was like, I do have a podcast. And at the time, I only had 10 episodes up to that point because I had stopped for a while.
Right.
And then from May 2023 up until today, I have went from 10 episodes to 60 episodes.
That's awesome.
And I actually took another break earlier this year because I was trying to catch up on editing.
Yeah.
But the podcast, what I have learned is that we have so many amazing people that just, for me, it's about just showing that we're people. So it's not any true intent. Like, it's no, like, we're not talking specifically about IA. We're not talking about like leadership issues. We're not talking about retirement. We're talking about whatever the person wants to talk about, whatever that might be. So I say whatever's on your heart, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about it from anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes, just depends on how it goes. But with the concept of, okay, I just want to let people know they're not alone. And I want them to, because I can tell people my story all the time.
Yeah.
But when you start hearing it like you're doing on your podcast, it allows that person to have a voice.
Yes.
And that's what I want. That's what the goal of the podcast is. So when you and I connected, I was like, yeah, I'd love to be on your podcast, because internal affairs is something that people think they're alone on, because a lot of times you are isolated. But I think a podcast like yours lets people know, hey, start listening to some of these stories. You will hear people that have went through bad things, but they're still here to talk about it.
Yes.
So don't think about harming yourself because you have something bad going on. Worst case scenario, quit the job.
Yeah.
Go get another one.
Yeah.
In California, if something happens to you and you're listening to the podcast, there's a lot of jobs out here in California.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, trust me, I've been driving around the last couple of days and there's so many things you can do. So you don't have to be in law enforcement. But like, I'm only saying that if you feel like your boiling point is too high.
Gotcha.
But for me, it's been the podcast is one of the biggest things I've been focused on. Obviously, I love the keynote speaking. That's going to be my bread and butter. I mean, I speak anywhere. I speak mostly to law enforcement. That's probably about 80 to 90% of my business, whether that's chiefs conferences, sheriff's conferences. I'm actually going to a deputy sheriff's conference next week in Missouri.
Awesome.
But it's all about spreading the message of mental wellness and leadership and how those two groups play together.
Yeah.
And not leadership by title, leadership just by skill. Because you could be a SWAT officer and be the team lead without the title.
Yeah.
If everybody looks up to you and you're not promoting mental wellness, everybody else on your team is going to fail.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm really pushing out. Like, how as leaders, without the titles, how as leaders are we helping our brothers and sisters out? Whether they're going through IA, whether they're going through a divorce, whatever it might be. So a lot of my keynotes are focused on that. And then obviously with the podcast, it all combines.
That's awesome. Before I forget, would you agree with me that when we talk about mental wellness, we basically think of a partner committing suicide, suicidal ideations, or critical incidents, right? An officer-involved shooting, your partner gets killed in the line of duty. Those are the kind of things that are on the shelf when it comes to mental wellness. But we don't really think about discipline.
No, we don't. And I could tell you, it's because it's like being a correctional officer, but in a form of investigation. And like I said, like I'm making this analogy up right now, so I don't think I thought about this for a long time. So you know how we look at corrections, we say, okay, someone goes to jail, lock them away and throw away the key. Someone still has to watch them. Same thing with IA. Put them under investigation, we'll get to them eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll see what happens.
Yes.
And then that person's isolated.
They're on the island all alone.
Yeah. Then so now, just like a correctional officer is like, okay, just because the inmate is arrested, somebody has to watch it for 20 years. Who's going to do that? Same thing with someone in IA. Who knows how long that vet's going to take?
Yes.
But a lot of times they're isolated. Nobody wants to talk to them. Nobody wants to be on their side and say, hey, Marlon, how's it going? Most people are like, oh man, you're on an investigation. I don't know what's going on,
can't
but
talk to you.
I don't want to be part of it, because then people might think I did something.
Yeah.
And you're like, bro, I didn't even do anything.
Yeah.
Like, just because someone made up this allegation or they're just trying to take me out because I said something that they didn't like, now everybody's looking at me crazy. So I know for the internal affairs side, mental wellness is important to impact, because one of the hardest things we can do is handle these struggles by ourselves. And sometimes when you're under the disciplinary process, you are doing things by yourself. Not because you want to, it's just that as a community, that's how we think. So mental wellness is extremely important, especially in the discipline phases.
Yeah. I will always say this, and have been since I launched this 7 months ago, is there will never be enough platforms, enough podcasts for us to get our message out and for us to be a voice. We can do this until all the way to our grave, and there still won't be enough.
Correct.
I really appreciate it. Hey, man, it's been fun. I'll leave the floor up to you. Any advice you have for anyone who wants to become a cop or get involved in law enforcement, man? What kind of advice would you give them?
Make sure it's your calling before you come into it. Don't take law enforcement as a paycheck, because on day one, and this hasn't happened to me, but I've heard people tell me, especially through the podcast, I've had somebody, their first call in FTO, double homicide. if you're not ready to handle the stresses of society because you're not mentally fit yourself, don't go do it. Yeah. And I think where sometimes we see our officers struggling early on in their career because they haven't found themselves. So if you haven't found yourself yet, find yourself before you even say, oh, you know what? I want to be LAPD because the benefits are good. Or you know what? I saw Marlon on this IA podcast. I want to do what he's doing.
Yeah.
No, you need to be strong internally because when you put that uniform on and you hit these streets, that's what people expect. And you don't want to be trying to play catch up. You get to a call and it's like you're caught with your pants down because you're like, oh, I didn't know I was going to actually come to a homicide. I didn't know I was going to come to a baby death. I didn't know I was going to have to break up two people that love each other and tell one to go to somewhere for the night. I didn't know that. Yeah. And if you're struggling, start therapy early. Yeah. I mean, I do therapy once a month, and I love it. Oh, man. And I can say I've done it all my life. I just started doing it 2 years ago because I had to practice what I preached. Yeah. And I use a therapist, and she's great. She tells me to get my head out of the butt more than I can imagine. Yeah. And she's a completely neutral party, Marlon, which is good. But, that's what I tell people. Make sure you're mentally ready for what this industry requires of you. Amen. Because the industry's tough. Yes. And if you're thinking about being a cop or being in any form of law enforcement, you need to be strong internally. And that's something that I've really been harping on the last couple of years because I realized I even had my own weaknesses that was keeping me from doing certain things, like the podcast. I should never took a break. But it's because I didn't understand my energy. I didn't understand what my purpose was. Yes. And then once I started to realize that through just seeing fellow brothers and sisters do things to themselves negatively, I was like, you know what? I need to get myself stronger so I can impact that next person. And one final thing. Yes. I tell people, be selfish. And they're like, be selfish? Be selfish in your growth. Because if you're not selfish and you don't take your growth seriously, nobody else will. Yeah. And I learned, even that's why I wear this shirt that says, my failures is my fuel. Yeah. Because what we have gone through, we can learn from. If we're able to talk, we're able to breathe, we can share our message. But that all comes from just internalizing, knowing who you are. So know who you are, be selfish in what you do, and you'll see everything in your life flourish. And that's being a cop. And I know some amazing ones, and they usually know themselves pretty well.
That's awesome, dude. Man, good one. Tallahassee, Florida, man. How was that like? And now, hey, I got a question for you. What did you go to Florida and then
we
to
were
Texas?
winners in Seminoles, so that's why I went there. Florida State was winners in college football.
It's the Seminoles, but listen to Georgia Tech didn't feel so good.
No. Being number 5 last year versus number 4, actually it worked out pretty well because we would have got smoked even more as number 4. Like it was. I get those calls all the time. Or text, how do you feel that you didn't make the top 4? I said pretty good because it would have just exposed that we didn't have a good quarterback.
I'm excited for the 12. The 12 team.
It's gonna be the same thing. It's just gonna be 12 team. I don't know, man. Well, it's a money thing. I mean, it's a fun.
Well, the shittiest part about the whole thing is that 5 and 6 always get the end of the stick, man.
Yeah, because they got to play each other. Yeah.
And some of them, no. Well, not only that. So top 4 has been like that, right? We're talking about college football here. Yeah. And then the number 5 seed, number 6 seed, they can't go to the party. Yeah. And what sucks is that there's been years where 5 and 6 have been undefeated. And they're like, wait a minute, hold on a second. These dudes over here have 1 or 2 losses, and they don't make it. So I'm excited for 12. Florida, Miss Florida, or no?
I love Houston, Texas.
Yeah, you got to say that because you're a Houston guy now. You're H-Town.
I am H-Town now. Yeah. But you know what? I've had chances to go to Florida, back to Florida, and I tell people once you get somewhere, well, I mean, I can live anywhere. I mean, I've lived in 5 or 6 different places at this point.
L.A.? You like L.A.?
I didn't say I can live here. And you don't have to edit that out either. For all people watching, I live in no L.A. You know how expensive it is here? Gas is like $12 a gallon. In Texas, $2.75. I literally got gas on Tuesday. It was $2.75 a gallon. I'm driving down the road. I'm like, I don't care what electric is. Like, everything's expensive around here. Like, no, Marlon, no. I cannot live in L.A. because I like having space. I like not paying $800,000 for a house. If I pay $800,000 for a house in Texas,
it better be a man. It's going to be a mansion.
No. It is a mansion. It's a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot house with 26 bedrooms. We might have some cows in the backyard.
Yeah, we ain't editing.
That might be a studio.
We ain't going to edit. We ain't going to edit that.
So I can live anywhere, but these expensive states, no. But I do love LA. I love what I have seen here. I mean, I actually went to the Kobe Bryant and Gianna statue earlier today. I enjoy coming to visit. Just like I tell people, like I'm from Miami, Florida originally, I like to come and visit. I don't want to live in these places. Like just like even New York. Like I haven't even been. I've been around New York City, but never in it because they're like, why not? Why? So I can go walk around with busy people and touching my shoulders all day. So no, LA. I like LA. I ain't living in LA. So anybody that wants to hire me to do work in LA, I will come back.
I got you.
Yeah, I will come back.
But I'm going to H-Town.
Yeah. Oh no, you go to H-Town, you may not come back.
Okay.
You see people even go to Austin, man. People leave California for Austin, they don't come back. So
Yeah, I hear you, bro.
I always tell them, hey, don't let them go to Houston because you're gonna lose half your population. Once they realize that you can pay half the rent and get more stuff. Yes.
Gotta have so much fun. Hey, ML, man, thanks for everything, and we're gonna wrap it up. And if you like this video, don't forget to click on and watch the next video. And like I always say, please be safe out there, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.